If you clicked on this video, chances are you might get confused by the title and how these two random series are correlated to each other in any way. Well, let me explain. With the recent discussions surrounding indie animation, I wanted to go over a case by comparing two separate indie animated series and show how these animations do a great job in working with Tween Animation and how they worked around using this animation style in order for it to work in their favor. Before that, however, let's explain what Flash animation, or rather Tween Animation, is for those who may not know what that is.
Tween animation, to put it simply, is something like 2D stop motion, where you make certain shapes and objects move by setting them up in different positions in an animation timeline, so that it could come out as a complete animation. Now, obviously, there is more that comes to tweening, and it's a bit more complicated than what I just described, but this is the best way I can personally describe it. However, I've been noticing how tweening tends to get a bad rap sometimes due to its quote-unquote cheap nature. But I want to argue that tweening animation, as well as any forms of animation, minus AI generated, can have the potential to come out looking great and with high quality if given the chance. With many styles of animations and art projects in general, there is one aspect that matters way more than anything else that goes to an art project, and that is how much you care for it. This might not sound like much, but if I'm being honest, there has to be a decent or high level of care put into an animation in order for it to be appealing in some way. That doesn't mean the animation has to be realistic looking or always have a sense of beauty. If an art style works for you and benefits the story in some way, then it still works in being appealing to anyone who might find it interesting. Doesn't matter if it's abstract, simple, complex, or even stylized. It can still work in many ways as long as you care that it comes out good in your eyes. Because trust me when I say this, if you don't have enough care or passion for any project you're making, then chances are it's going to come out as a lazy, unappealing mess that has no effort put into it. Doesn't matter how high quality it looks, if the animation or even the story is not given the same amount of care, then it loses any sense of potential it might have had. Just look at Disney's live action movies or any projects that use AI generated stuff. Those are obviously made by people who are looking for quick easy money and their 15 minutes of fame. Fortunately, these animated series show that if you actually do care about your project and put the time and effort you have into it, it's going to come out as a product that everyone can enjoy, no matter the quality or animation style. One great example is from what I can find, the creator of the series, GioEXE, started off in DeviantArt around 2007, but according to this image here, probably started even earlier than that in a different platform around 2003. I can't find anything related to Geo around that time, but if you guys find or know anything, please let me know. While this series took a while to find its identity through concept art and teasers, the pilot episode will eventually be released on January 29th, 2016, with incredible, albeit minor success. But that didn't stop Geo from wanting to make a full series and decided that it was good enough to be followed up by 8 new episodes, with the upcoming 9th one stated to be the last. One Sega is a great example of showing what you can do with Tween Animation and how it uses it to its fullest potential. And the fact that this entire series animation was made by one person is impressive. With such a small team working on this project, it's amazing how high quality and polished this whole series looks. With how amazingly beautiful the background looks, with the added bonus of the soundtrack being very good to listen to. My personal favorite is episode 7's song, Fight Chili with Chili. I totally recommend listening to it. The characters move so smoothly, you almost forget that this was made with Tween Animation. It really feels like the show knows how to give a sense of dynamic movement whenever it deems it necessary. Especially with how the fight scene choreography managed to use this art style of animation very smoothly is truly a testament to what tweening can do if given the chance. From the human characters, the robot characters, and even the creatures shown move and animated in such a way that still feels smooth and eye-catching while still trying to keep their movements different from one another. They blend in such a way that it's obvious that the animators wanted to make everything run great while still keeping the attention to detail consistent. One of my favorite examples of this was in episode 6, where the guard greets Amy and Geo with the sword blade, but Geo catches it in time to block the attack. After giving Gio the package, Gio leaves and we find out that Gio cut the blade off his sword without him realizing it. But if you go back to the moment where the guard is swirling the sword, if you pause at just the right frame, or use the frame by frame tool, not judging if you do it, you can see that the blade was already cut off before the reveal. I just found out about this detail just a while ago, and that just makes me like the series a lot more than before. One last thing about this series' use of animation style is how it's used differently for each segment of the recent episodes. In one moment, it feels like you're watching a normal isekai anime, but then the next thing you know, it switches to using a pixelated video game animation style. You think that it would get tiring after a while, but this show translates between these animation styles so smoothly that you don't even notice it or even care that it happened at all. And many of the characters and backgrounds are translated smoothly into the pixelated art style so well that's hard not to feel impressed. While episodes 1 to 6 used to have pixel art animation styles similar to that of Super Mario Bros. Sprites fan animations, episode 7 and onwards instead decide to use a more HD-ish style, by keeping the same art style as the rest of the series, but still animated them in a way that still feels like an arcade game that uses pixel artwork like Castlevania, or more accurately, fighting games like Marvel vs. Capcom. It's smooth, but still feels like you're playing a remastered version of a classic 90s arcade game. With the final episode coming very soon, I highly recommend watching this if you're a huge fan of anime or looking for something new or obscure. I promise you that you won't regret it. Its animation styles and decisions like this is why I appreciate this series and have a better understanding of tweening, because while it is normally basic, you can definitely still push it in a way that the animation can become something different yet familiar when compared to other media that uses tween animation. You can use the medium in any way, shape, or form to fit whatever genre or story that is being told, just like the next series. While GioEXE shows how you can use tween animations to make everything feel dynamic and alive, Martin Walsh's The Walton Files shows how using the same style of animation can become unsettling and disturbing if it's done right. Starting in 2020, The Walton Files is without a doubt one of the most influential pieces of analog horror media on YouTube, and it's not hard to see why. While following a similar premise to Five Nights at Freddy's, what makes this series unique is how they approach the concept in a much darker and different approach, building up with its own mysteries and mythos while being accompanied with disturbing and terrifying imagery. But obviously, the aspects that I want to focus on right now is with its use of tween animation. While early on in the series, it's mostly just basic movements and nowhere near as complex as something as GioEXE, over time the series adapts its basic tweening animation into something much more complex and unique that fits the tone of the series. Instead of trying to be somewhere like realistic human-like movements, it instead adapts to focus more on showing animatronic or uncanny-like movements, going for a more stylistic approach instead, similar to an old show that used paper cutouts. For example, while episodes 1 to 3 mostly depended on the characters who are moving to be standing still and only moving its arms and head, the animators still do as much as they could to not only express movement, but to emphasize the unnatural actions being done, showing that in fact these things that are moving are indeed not human, or at the very least not anymore. It really shows how much Martin can show while working with such limited use of animation. Sure, while this series does use other styles of visual storytelling besides animations such as animatics or the basic analog horror PowerPoint formulas, it still adds the tone and story it wants to convey. While the segments that do utilize tweening animation are small in the early episodes, they still do a great job in emphasizing what the story wants us to focus on. It adds to the story in a way where once the series decides to use the tweening animation format for a scene, then you know that you're in for a terrifying, uncomfortable surprise. Obviously, Martin has gotten better with his animation skills as the series went on, even getting the help of other animators to help with the project. And over time, the series began to lean more on the uncanny valley for its movements. By the time episode 4 came out, its animation and movements have become far more complex, being able to show other movements such as walking and head turning, giving it a breath of fresh air for the series. And yet, despite all of that, it still retains its uncanny movements that the series has grown to be associated with. If anything, the series has learned to embrace that rough, uncanny animation style in order to benefit itself in a way that's surprisingly effective. Sure, while there are moments that can't be pointed out where the animation gets wonky and it looks rough at times, it still doesn't take away from the overall experience. If anything, it probably just adds to it. From the way Bond moves to how the supernatural spirits are animated, it's clear just by their movements alone that they are expressing themselves in that exact moment. Even with the human characters, it still works despite the fact that it shouldn't. But as stated before, the animators still found a way to work around the limitations given to them in order to make something work. With examples like how Felix and Jax are feeling, how Ed and Molly are looking for their parental guardian at their school, to even how uncomfortable or even downright terrifying Susan's death is when it happens, the style of the animation still manages to work in its favor. Even as recent as the return of the Pumpkin Rabbit, as well as future episodes, it's obvious that Martin has not only been able to fully master his style of animation, but also manages to use it to its full advantage in order to give his audience one of, if not the best experience in the analog horror community. While both of these series may appear dramatically different next to each other, due to them being from completely different genres and the type of stories they focus on, they both are great examples of how effective a style of animation can be if they are not only pushed to its limits, but also take risks in trying to push the art style of their respective series to its limits. Even something animated using tweening techniques can become something either incredibly beautiful or downright terrifying if done so well. In my opinion, both of these series are both opposite sides of the same spectrum when it comes to how tweening animation can be effectively used. You can use it to carefully craft something that is not only flawless and high quality, but also, depending on the scene, manages to create a sequence of action movements that's on par with other high quality series, or even make something that can be considered one of the best pieces of horror media to be created, even if the animation is limited by its movements at times. Both are great high quality produced series that manages to execute their style of movements and art styles, and while it might appear different from each other, the fact that both are animated using the same tweening techniques just shows how flexible tween animation can be, as well as any other form of animation styles. This shows that no matter what kind of animation style or genre any series is focused on using, anyone is able to create something that's an amazing and unique experience as long as you manage to not only push the limits of any style, but also yourselves creatively as an artist.